G'day and welcome to NWR's Vantage Point Conference. Up next, we've got Playside. We've got the co-founder, Jerry Sakis, and the Chief Strategy Officer, Ben Skender. Before I hand it over to the guys to go through the presentation, which in my opinion is one of the best looking presentations released on the ASX for a long time. But just a reminder, you can submit questions on the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen. We'll get to those post the end of the presentation. But Jerry, Ben, I'll hand it over to you to go through the preso. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Simon. Hey, everyone. I'm Jerry Sakis, co-founder and CEO of Playside Studios, and I'm joined by Ben Skender, our Chief Strategy Officer. This afternoon, we'll briefly go through some of the key slides from the investor deck that we lodged earlier with the ASX today. A bit of an overview about Playside. We've been a public company for about 2.5 years, but we founded the company more than a decade ago. My background was originally in game design. I was a lead game designer at EA Games, one of the largest games companies in the world. I'm not on the tools making our games anymore, but I've established a very strong team of divisional heads and leaders, a mix of staff that have come up through the ranks of Playside, as well as talent from AAA studios like Bethesda, Riot Games, and Team 17 that are able to work with each other in bringing a game from concept through our greenlight process to me onto development and launch. We had around 70 staff at IPO, and we have more than 260 today, with offices in Melbourne and on the Gold Coast, as well as a handful of employees working remotely in Oz, New Zealand, and a publishing team based in the UK. Playside is involved in the development and publishing of our own game titles across mobile, PC, and VR. We also publish and part fund the development of game titles being made by smaller independent studios. We do this in exchange for revenue share. Along with all of that, we also provide the more major AAA studios with end-to-end game development services. This year alone, we've acted as a trusted partner for the likes of Meta in creating games for its suite of virtual reality projects, for Activision Blizzard in maintaining one of their major titles on PC, Warcraft 3. And we're also doing work for Take-Two Interactive on one of its key gaming franchises, as well as working with others in developing games based on highly recognizable IP. Those game development services are reported in our work for hire division. This financial year, we've guided to group revenues of at least 35 million and for our work for hire division to generate revenues in the low 20 million range. That division is highly profitable, and alongside a 30 mil cash balance, it is a critical funding source for developing our own game titles. In turn, when we develop strong content for our own, particularly on newer platforms for us like PC, it demonstrates our extended capabilities to clients, and we end up winning more work for hire as a result. That's a pattern we're becoming very good at replicating, and you can see this demonstrated in the graph on this slide. Prior to IPO, we had established an excellent reputation with predominantly Hollywood movie studios in developing smaller mobile games to develop their marketing on new films. We made games based on SpongeBob, the movie Cars, Lego Batman. We'd effectively proven that we could develop quality products based on valuable IP owned by a movie studio and distill that into a mobile game. We used the funds from that work for hire to make mobile games based on our own concepts. And following our IPO, we started down the path of working towards much more substantial original IP content. This began with acquiring the licenses to develop mobile games based on Legally Blonde and The Godfather, which we own, acquiring the Dumb Ways to Die brand from Metro Trains, working with social media influencers to develop World Boss on PC, a marketing initiative that helped get our name out there beyond just the mobile games industry, and the real-time strategy game Age of Darkness, which launched in early access on PC in October 2021. Not only was Age of Darkness an award-winning title in its genre, but the quality of the game was recognized by the larger AAA studios. This ultimately helped us to win much larger work for hire projects in the last year, because we demonstrated that we can make great games for PC as well as mobile and VR. While work for hire will contribute revenue in the low 20 million range in FY23, our 12-month forward book is now around 29 million, which is absolutely by design. It sets us up to continue this path of delivering larger original IP titles across PC and eventually console. One of the biggest areas of focus at Playside currently is to deliver major PC console titles. And while these are 1 to 3 year undertakings, having the visibility of a growing multi-year work for hire book is an essential part of being able to execute on those aspirations. You might be thinking, why not just continue to grow a much lower risk work for hire book and take the shortest path to profitability, as many other small companies are encouraged to do? The reason we reinvest in original IP content is we think there is substantial shareholder value to be generated if we can just develop a breakout title. And we are confident that we have the capabilities and the resources to deliver on that. We've included a few slides that outline some of the current themes in the games industry, which will hopefully provide you with a better look at why the future of Playside is in developing our own original IP content. Video games are currently a US $200 billion market. As you can see, they are forecast to represent a much greater percentage of global entertainment and media sector spend going forward. The next slide really demonstrates how the trend is already playing out in 2023. You may have already seen elements of this, but not properly appreciating how much crossover is occurring between TV, film media, and gaming as gaming becomes a much more mainstream product. In short, games franchises are setting sales and viewership records as films and TV shows, and the same is true for the adaptation of a strong franchises into video games. One of the things we'd like to do in the medium term is leverage our capabilities in game development and our reputation with the entertainment industry to secure the license to make a PC console game based on a strong franchise. From an investment perspective, this trend is pulling new entrants into the gaming space. Netflix Games launched a couple of years ago. They've so far acquired 6 game development studios. They have 40 games coming out this year and have nearly 90 in development. Playside is one of those third parties Netflix is working with, as they are paying us to develop a game based on the IP that we own, Dumb Ways to Die, which is yet another example of the value of owning, creating, and nurturing franchises. Meta is another frequent partner for us, and in fact, one of our recent signings with them was to make a mixed reality game that we conceptualized. We will also receive a share of sales post-launch for that title. Meta has been pressing with its investment in virtual and augmented reality with the launch of the Quest Pro headset last year. We also think that the emergence of Apple as a potential competitor in the VR and AR space later this year is only going to increase consumer demand for new gaming content. The demand for content is a major driver of the consolidation that we've seen recently and continue to see amongst the AAA gaming studios. We look at franchises like Angry Birds, which is the major asset of Rovio, which Sega has bid $770 million US for, and ask ourselves, how do we continue to extend the reach and value of our Dumb Ways to Die franchise, which has had more than 15 million game downloads in the last quarter, was #1 on the US App Store charts during February and March, has more than 1 billion views on YouTube, and is one of the top 10 gaming accounts on TikTok. This slide just points out that this strategic investment and consolidation isn't just happening at the top end of town either. There remains a handful of mid-sized studios globally, most of which are publicly listed, some of whom are working on their path to funding and creating hit games by doing work for hire or seeking publishing deals from AAA studios. And many of them have already seen majors like Tencent, Krafton, and Sony take a spot on the register. In summary, we think Playside is a pivotal point. And we think Playside is at a pivotal point as we approach the end of this financial year. Not only are we set to deliver more than 75% underlying revenue growth in FY23, but our recent work for hire signings have given us the excellent visibility over our revenue pipeline, which enables us to continue to invest in creating a portfolio of strong original IP content, which we believe is the medium-term value driver for the business. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jerry. First question, can you give any insight into the work for hire pipeline and what new wins we might expect going forward over the next 12 months or so?
Ben, do you want to take work for hire?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we provided an update on the 12-month forward book in our deck. We've said that sits at 28.6 million. In terms of the pipeline going forward, our BDMs and some of the divisional leads are actually attending a lot of the international gaming conferences at the moment. I think there's probably not been any real change in terms of the velocity of interest in work for hire overall, and those conferences, tend to be a good catalyst of starting discussions for future work that we might win over the next 12 months.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. What's your view on the trajectory of the VR business?
I think I've always said since IPO that we viewed VR, since 2017 as really the future of gaming. I think that it will take a few years to kick off, as we've kind of always said, but really the end goal and the end game for all of gaming will be VR. And so we will continue to play in the space until we think that the market is right to launch our own original IP product. along the way, we'll do things like we're doing with Meta, which is a much more guaranteed outcome, since they are the publisher and they also own the hardware. So we're looking to do some more stuff like that. But in the end, once VR or AR is covering your face, there's not really anywhere else to go in terms of gaming. So I think that is the end game for gaming, and we'll hopefully be one of the only studios that are, primed, ready to jump into that.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Can you talk to us about what the critical focus is of the company over the next 12 months and how that perhaps differs from the sort of 2 to 3 year view?
Yeah, I think, the next 12 months, the way that I work and the way I've always worked is the next 12 months I was, worrying about 2 to 3 years ago. And so that's already kind of locked in. As we've already shown, we're sort of just talking about our work for hire pipeline as it is, but it's the exact same on the original IP side of things. I think that our goal now is to really transition, and what we've been doing over the last 2 years is transitioning from a small mobile developer that worked on Hollywood titles to a large PC, console, mobile, VR, AR developer that does everything but works on predominantly AAA gaming titles. And then really, instead of getting work for hire deals from Hollywood, we buy their franchises and we launch them ourselves. A great example of that was the Harry Potter title that came out recently, which did over $1 billion in sales in its first month. Now, the game was great, but the franchise is what drew all the attention to it. We are trying to look for something similar.
Perfect.
Might just add there, Jerry, publishing is probably something that we're focused a lot on over the next 12 months in particular. It's taken us 10 months to effectively set up that division, bring in some world-class talent, source enough opportunities to consider before we've actually signed our first deal, which we have with Dynasty of the Sands. That game will go into early access sometime inside the next 12 months, but I think it's probably not going to take us another 10 months to get our next signing. And so, getting a few runs on the board in that division is probably a focus, particularly over the next 12 months, say relative to 2 to 3 years time, when that'll have some good momentum behind it.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. What's been the recent experience with Dumbway's derived revenues, and what's the sort of expectation for FY24 in that regard?
Yeah, I think we've been pretty sort of open and transparent that the growth in Dumbways over the last quarter or so has really been, since the beginning of the year, has been about the TikTok sort of revitalizing of the brand. We still continue to see a pretty decent sort of plateau from that. It didn't just kind of dip back to where it was. It's actually stayed, at a decent range, a range that we're happy with. Dumbways to Die 4 came out as well, had hundreds of thousands of pre-orders, is doing really well for what that title was meant to be. Remember, we started developing this before the TikTok hype came out. So Dumbways to Die 1 is still the major product in that portfolio. However, our sort of core focuses internally now are, how do we grow that franchise even more? I think we've kind of alluded to that in the deck today in terms of where we think we can take a major gaming franchise. And I think that our goal is to create products with Dumbways to Die outside of gaming that can bring people into the gaming landscape and play the game. So essentially bring products out that have lots of viewers or users, and then bring them into our games to monetize them and sort of cross-pollinate that. In terms of the other things that we're focusing on Dumbways, the main one is obviously the Netflix deal that we've got, Dumbways to Survive. So that's sort of where we're at the moment.
Perfect. Thanks, Jerry. There's been a ridiculous amount of chatter about recent progression in developing AI and some concern about how disruptive this can be to various industries. How does Playside see AI's influence in the game development industry?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of engineers here who actually have PhDs in AI. So we're quite at the forefront of what's going on. We've obviously been developing a lot of AI in our games in the last sort of decade, but this type of AI is very different. And it's something that we've been involved with before it was kind of the hot topic. We've always used it sort of historically as a way to help our concept artists concept things much faster. They're able to start at a point where they can give some prompts to a program like Midjourney, OpenAI, or Photoshop's new tool to help them, get almost a few days ahead of where they would have already been at that last concept stage in developing an environment specifically, or sometimes characters as well. AI is growing so fast that, I'd be surprised if not by the end of the year that we'd be able to do the same thing in 3D as well. Get an asset to its sort of rawest stage quite quickly and then build on top of that. Epic are doing some amazing things with AI in the Unreal Engine that we're in pretty close talks with Epic about how to use all of that technology. We've built our own API across a bunch of different AIs that exist currently. One example of how it can speed up, development or just time wasting things that you don't really need a human to be doing is, one of the things that you need to take really seriously when developing a game is the community feedback. And the way that has worked traditionally is a very clunky system in the back end of either Steam or the App Store or Discord, reviews, all these different places. And we've developed an AI that can essentially farm all of that data and then spit out the main talking points based on the aggregate of everyone. And that work would take weeks usually of a community manager's time to then start their work. That wasn't really an important part of their work. The important part was actually looking at what are people saying. And so we've developed an AI that does that, and it saves us months, a year now in doing that. So it's across the business in multiple ways is how I'd say it.
Perfect. That is comprehensive and nice and punchy. Jerry and Ben, thanks very much for presenting. And if there's any sort of follow-up feedback or questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to hear. But thanks very much, guys, and thanks all for attending.
Thanks Simon. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys.